Hi, everybody. Thank you all for joining me today. And this presentation that I'm going to talk about is a very special one. It's my favorite one, and it means the most because it's about my family. We're going to talk about all kinds of things here about the descendants of the Rose family that left Gallia County, Ohio, and ended up in Wood County. And my grandpa brings some drama to all of this. So we're going to get into all of that. So here on a map, in case you're unfamiliar with where we're talking about, this is the state of Ohio, and then marked in red at the bottom by West Virginia is the county we are talking about, Gallia County, Ohio. A little bit of history about the county itself and the residents in this county is they were some Welsh immigrants that decided to leave the United Kingdom for the United States in search of new opportunities. They were drawn by the chance to own land, enjoy the religious freedoms without interference, and build a better economic future for themselves and their families in the future generations that they were going to have. The Rose family is going to descend from these Welsh immigrants. In the early 1800s, a wave of Welsh settlers was drawn to Gallia County, attracted by its proximity to the Ohio River, the fertile land, and promising economic opportunities. 36 immigrants were on the way to Jackson County and stopped in Gallipolis for supplies and decided to stay. The settlers originally were from Cardiganshire and ended up in Gallia County. There's a town called Little Cardiganshire, and it's named after these people. At this time, this is people on the river on a boat. Very little shelter, very little food, very little of anything with them. If I was on this boat, the first happy spot I would see, I would be wanting to jump off that boat and make a civilization, make their home there just like they did. There's no way I'd want to continue up the river on that boat. We're going to start with Seabird Rose. He was born to John and Margaret Stevens Rose of Montgomery County, Virginia in 1799. Seabird relocated from Virginia to Ohio by 1818 based on the records. He was married to Amy Lambert, the daughter of William and Rhoda Burchett Lambert, and they were married in Gallia County, March of 1818. Here is a copy of their marriage record from 1818 from that county, which still survives. This script is so pretty, and I just can't believe we don't have this type of writing anymore. It is just beautiful to watch or to read. On the 10th of November, 1840, Seabird was granted 40 acres homestead. This land was recorded as, this is going to be a mouthful, northeast quarter of the southeast quarter of Section 29 in Township 6 of Range 17 in the district of lands subject to sale at Chillicothe, Ohio, containing 40 acres. We tried to find this on a map. Thankfully, my husband is in architecture and is used to reading maps. That little blue dot is where we think the area of the Rose land was granted at. This is where we think it is, that little teeny tiny box on the far western part of Gallia County. Seabird and Amy, they had 10 children. Here is a list of the children: Pleasant, John, Elizabeth, Edward, William, Rhonda, Martha, James, Delilah, and Deborah Rose. We are going to follow their child, Pleasant Lot Rose, for the upcoming slides. Seabird passed away in 1855 in Gallia County. He is possibly buried at Gallia Methodist Church Cemetery in Greenfield Township. I say possibly because this is where his wife is buried. We don't know that he's there, but I assume that he probably is. Pleasant Lot Rose was born on April 18th, 1820 in Greenfield Township and was the eldest child of Seabird and Amy. On the 4th of November, which is a very special day in our family, 1841, he was married to Amanda Yingling. She was born on the 8th of April, 1820 to John James Yingling Sr. and Catherine DeLong. And here is a copy of their marriage record in the same county for 1841, again with that beautiful script. Pleasant and Amanda also had a large family. We're going to follow their son, their eldest, John D. Rose, born in 1844. But the other children were Amy, William, Rhonda, Candace, Margaret, Amanda, and Minnie Belle Woodruff. She was actually adopted by the Rose family. We are unsure of who her biological parents are. There's a little bit of issues with the records because in some records it's Cross and some records it's Woodruff as her surname, but I think the Woodruff is her true surname because that's the earliest one that I find. I don't know where the Cross had come from. Maybe it's another name that her parents had, maybe the mom's maiden name, I'm not sure. But Minnie was adopted by the Rose family. Pleasant Rose was a significant figure in the early development of Gallia County, Ohio. His life spanned a transformative period in the region, from frontier days to the growth of agriculture and industrial communities. As a son of early settlers, Pleasant Rose played a key role in that expansion of Gallia County. Living through the Civil War and the industrialization of the Ohio River region, Pleasant's contributions were a part of the larger transformation of Gallia County from the rural frontier to a thriving agriculture and industrial community by the late 19th century. Pleasant was a thriving businessman and grew the worth of his farm from $400 as seen in 1850's census to over $4,000 in 1860s. That was a typo on my part. Not the $25, it was $400. In 1860, it was 4,000. Pleasant was known for his leadership within his local community. He was involved in both social and civic matters, helping to foster the growth and cooperation among the early settlers of the county. His family became an integral part of Gallia County and the community of Greenfield Township specifically. He participated in local activities, contributing to the county's growth during a critical period in Ohio's history. He served as the constable and township assessor for 3 different terms. He was a trustee for 2 different terms. He was a clerk for 1 term, and he was also elected the Justice of the Peace in 1873. I found this page in one of the historical websites for the history of Gallia County. This was published in 1882 and is a amazing gem that I found that gave us a lot of information that I wouldn't have found earlier. There's no records of this in Gallia County, their genealogical society, their library. They don't have any records whatsoever that could help me on the Rose family. So this little piece of information that was recorded in 1882 was a gem to find. I'll let you guys read that for just a second. Here is some of the little articles that I had found on Pleasant Rose in the newspapers. This is giving us information that he was the Justice of the Peace even in 1874. He was responsible for mainly handling the civil and criminal cases and also the marriages. I have him highlighted in the larger picture for Greenfield Township, where he was elected the Justice of the Peace. And then on the smaller one, you can see that he was also listed there. He passed away on February 2nd of 1906 and is buried beside his wife Amanda in the Gallia Baptist Cemetery. And it's also known as the Gallia Cemetery, Soldiers Cemetery, but this is in Greenfield Township. You're going to see a lot of repeating names in here. And the next one is going to be John D. Rose, born December 26th of 1844 in Greenfield Township and passed away the 4th of June, 1910, also in Greenfield Township. He's a child of Pleasant and Amanda, and he was married to Amanda McCormick on October 31st of 1864 in Gallia County, Ohio. Amanda was born 19th July 1844 in Mercer, Virginia, and she passed away on January 29th, 1911 in Gallia County, Ohio. She is a child of Samuel McCormick and Maria Harmon. John is a long-standing Rose name that has been passed down after generation and generation and generation. It is a very popular name and a special name in our family. They also had a large family: William, Pleasant, Alwinda, Trenvilla, Nellie, Effie, John Edward, Melvina, and Luther Stanley. These children, as you can tell, you see them all born in Gallia County, Ohio, but they all end up in different places. They don't stay in this county. Here is the first photo we have, the earliest photo we have of the Rose family. Here is Luther Stanley and John Edward. They were siblings, and we estimate this was taken around 1910-ish, give or take, based on their ages. And we also have a little history on John Rose from that History of Gallia County of 1882. Some key highlights is he was a very poor man and he worked hard and sacrificed, so he was able to increase his wealth. He had the value of the $25 to his name when marrying Amanda in 1864 and increased that value in 1870 via the census to $800 in his real estate value and $100 in his personal value. His occupation was listed as a school director for 5 years, a collier, which is a coal miner, and also a farmer, which is in standing with the rest of the family. Just like his father, here's the announcement that he won the election for Justice of the Peace. So we have a family tradition going here of that occupation. And then he passes away on June 4th, 1910, and he's buried beside his wife Amanda at the Gallia Baptist Cemetery in Greenfield Township. We're going to continue on with his son Luther. Luther Stanley Rose Sr. was born on May 26, 1890 in Gallia County, Ohio, and passed away June 3rd, 1973 in Wood County, Ohio. He's a child of John and Amanda, and Luther was married to Hannah Elizabeth Drake on August 9th, 1910 in Hamilton, Ohio. Hannah was born on April 26, 1886 in Perry Township, and she passed away on April 13th, 1968 in Bowling Green, which is in Wood County. We are now migrating away from Gallia County, Ohio to Wood County, Ohio, where we are going to finish up with Luther. We're not sure exactly why all of the family moved. I talked to my grandfather and he says that it just wasn't great farming there for the family. They were sharecroppers at this point in time, and so they were trying to find a better opportunity to bring in more income for the family. So they left Gallia County being sharecroppers and moved to Wood County, Ohio to do the same thing. They were sharecroppers there also. Luther and Amanda had a large family of 8 children. They are Harmon, Wilson, Alma, Alice, Luther Jr., twin boys that passed away, and Dale. Here is the family photo of the adult children with Luther and Hannah at the bottom in the middle, surrounded by all of their children. This was taken right around the late 1960s. We also have this amazing photo of Luther and Hannah's home. It's kind of hard to see, but you can kind of see the family in front of that picket fence, and this home would have been in Portage, Ohio. The year is unknown. My grandpa remembers Luther as a very colorful person, and he says that's being polite. He was known for being a checkers champion. He was a farmer, and he also worked in the church as a deacon. But he won multiple checker competitions. I found so many articles about him winning, and at one point he was a 5-year-in-a-row champion. So I would say it's pretty safe that he was a checkers champion. He passes away on June 3rd, 1973, and he is also buried beside his wife Hannah in the Portage Cemetery in Wood County, Ohio. Here is a copy of his obituary accompanying his headstone. I'll let you guys read for a second before I move on. Harmon Edward Rose was born on 23rd of December 1910 in Greenfield Township, and he passed away on June 21st, 1984 in Maumee, Ohio, which is in Lucas County, which is very close to Wood County. It's a neighboring county. In Maumee, Lucas County, Ohio, he was a child of Luther Stanley Rose and Hannah Elizabeth Drake. Harmon was married to Dottie Irene Witten on September 22nd, 1934 in Wood County. Dottie Witten was born on 20th of April, 1916 in Portage, Ohio. She died on December 12th, 1990 in Ohio, and she was a child of Judson Marshall Winton and Anna Catherine Dietrich. A little information about Dottie's line is Anna, her mother, was the daughter that was affected by the German-French parents who were deeply affected by the Franco-Prussian War. I'm going to do a presentation on that whole fiasco later on, so stay tuned for that. Harmon is the most adorable baby with the chubbiest cheeks, and you can't tell in the picture, but he had red hair, and that's where his nickname came from. 1910, Gallia County, Ohio, and he was just a few months old, taken around 1911. My sister is currently pregnant with her very first child, and it's a little boy, and we cannot wait to see if there's any resemblance to Red. We are literally hoping that her baby boy has red hair. They had a good-sized family, not as large as the other paternal men in the family, but their children were Mary Ann, Nancy, Raymond, who went by Jack, Judith, John Edward, and James Harmon. As you can see, a lot of these family names has been passed down. However, I'm sad to say we haven't had a modern reoccurrence of Seabird or Pleasant. I'm going to try to pass that on to my sister to bring that name back. Harmon was a man described as one who never really had an actual job, but he had a lot of passions. Showing dogs and winning several titles was at the top of his list, and we are blessed to have some of these photos that survived. He was also a car salesman. Him and his family, they ended up creating Four Roses Auto Sales in Weston, Ohio. It was with his brothers, and a funny story that my grandfather shared was that the lot in Weston was empty for many years, and when they purchased it, there was cracks in the driveway, in the concrete. There was cracks, and in from those cracks, there was these weeds that were growing, and my great grandfather did not like that those weeds were growing, and so my grandpa goes and sprays weed killer. The weeds that were growing was actually marijuana. That was a hangout place for the teenagers in the area, and so that's where it had came from. Not only was he a car salesman and a prize-winning dog shower, he also was a fighter. He boxed and he was really good at it, and it wasn't just him, it was his brothers also. They were known to be very well with their hands. Here is Harmon and Dottie with their children, Mary, Nancy, Raymond, which is Jack, Judy, and John. This is in 1945. I love this picture of the smiling kids. Everybody is so sweet and happy, and everybody looks good. They all look healthy. At this time frame, everybody was poor, but they look happy and healthy. Here is Dottie with my grandpa John in his military uniform before he was shipping out with Harmon. Harmon passed away in 1984, and over the course of his life, he wore so many different hats. He owned a gas station in Portage with his brother. He worked as a car salesman for what Ralph Thayer Chevrolet, and then finally owned a family-owned dealership in Weston called Four Roses. He later renamed it to Rose Auto Sales. He was a prize-winning fighter. He showed the dogs. He's known to be in a few scrapes and things like that, usually because of his father, Luther. But he was a jack of all trades, and he's left a colorful, memorable legacy behind him. I wouldn't have known any of this if he didn't do any of this. He was a very interesting person in history, and he is definitely remembered, and he's loved. He passes away June 21st, 1984, and is buried beside Dottie at Wood County Memorial Gardens in Bowling Green, Ohio. And then we're going to go to my favorite person, John Edward Rose, my grandfather. He was born January 4th, 1944 in Wood County, Ohio. He was a child of Harmon and Dottie. John was married to Mary Lou Morrison in 1963 and thankfully divorced in 1969. She was born on 21st of October, 1946 in Ohio and passed away without much fanfare on January 2022 in Wood County. She was a child of Gerald Chamberlain and Inez Morrison. John then goes to marry Shirley Martin in 1977 and later divorces in 1988. Shirley was born around 1946. John then marries our grandmother, Ruth Eileen Wilhelm, on April of 1989 in Wood County, Ohio. Ruth was born in 1950 in Ohio and is a child of Leonard and Connie Wilhelm. And then here is my adorable grandfather as a child, and then his senior picture. Remember this cute little face in this senior picture. This is going to be plastered all over the news, everywhere, in the newspapers, because of some drama that happened. I'm going to just bring this picture back up again right before he left for the Vietnam War. And John and Mary Lou, they only had two children, Lori and John, who goes by Scott. They were both born in Wood County, Ohio. Here is a picture of John in the Vietnam War, and here is a picture of him in Washington, D.C. for an honor flight with his fellow veterans. He was very tickled about this day and even was interviewed for the news. So here comes the drama. And that quote up there is what he says. This was less exciting than the Vietnam. We have fugitives, we have a kidnapping, we have the FBI, we have a multiple state chase, we have all the things. So John Rose was driving along Sand Ridge Road in Bowling Green, Ohio, when he noticed to what appeared to be motorists in a truck to be stranded. A man was standing on the side of the road, waving him down, smoking a pipe, trying to get some help. Thinking they need assistance, my grandpa, being the grandpa that he is and being very kind, and this is the 1970s, you just stop to see what's wrong and if they need help. Thinking maybe it's just an issue with the car that he can help fix real quick, or maybe they need some gas, my grandpa decides to pull over and help. As he began speaking to the stranded motorist, an accomplice suddenly jumps into the passenger seat of John's car with a knife. John instinctively grabs that man's wrist and pins it to the dashboard, while the guy that was smoking the pipe has another one at my grandpa's throat and says, "If you want to live, I'd suggest you let go of him." My grandpa just says, "Okay, we're cool. It's fine. What do you need?" So he lets the other person go, and they get into the car and make him drive. What John didn't know is that he had encountered John Wayne Vest and James Allen Bobo Bird that had been escaped convicts from the Brushy Mountain Prison Honor Farm in Petros, Tennessee, just hours earlier. They had kidnapped the prison guard Herschel Jones at knife point, making him drive his truck from Tennessee to Bowling Green, Ohio, where they let him go and grabbed my grandpa in his red Dodge Dart. Once they had it inside the vehicle, they forced him to drive across multiple states. They had no money and began selling parts off of John's vehicle and stealing from other places along the way to afford gas and supplies. John was held against his will for 5 days, his every move controlled by the armed escapees. At one point, before they had left Ohio, they had made John take his clothes off and switch with the prison uniform. So John is driving this car across the state lines in a prison uniform while one of the other convicts, the one with the pipe, is wearing John's clothes. So my grandpa looks like he's the convict driving the vehicle. The group was spotted multiple times en route to wherever they were going, nobody knew, and there were confirmed sightings of him in Michigan. Eventually, they went on a police chase, and my grandpa was able to evade them. Remember, he had a knife to right up against him, and he's in a prison uniform. The police aren't going to ask questions. They're going to have armed people. They're going to result in probably a shootout. My grandpa didn't want to pass away. He had 2 little kids at home, so he just did the police chase, outran them, and they went on to New York. While on the way to New York, they run out of gas and they're stranded on the side of the freeway. Guess who gives them help? Not a normal citizen, but the highway patrolman for New York. They stopped to assist to give them gas. Didn't think anything about the prison uniform, nothing, gave them gas and sent them on their way. Eventually, they run out of money and car parts once they hit New York City, which is kind of a busy place and an easy place for convicts to disappear. New York City is a huge city. Nobody knows anybody there. So John dropped them off at Washington Square Park, and then John drove around Manhattan looking for a police station. This was before cell phones, before internet access at your fingertips. So he's a rural country boy in this big old city in New York, and trying to figure out how to navigate the city and find a police station was not an easy task. He ends up running out of gas in Manhattan in the middle of a road, and everybody's beeping at him, cussing at him, yelling at him. But to the left was a police station. So he managed to run out of gas, blocking the traffic, but he ended up at the police station. John walks in and is greeted with a big, grumpy cop who is on a raised platform behind a desk who says, "What do you want?" John just replies, "My name is John Rose, and I have been kidnapped from Ohio, and the FBI is looking for me." The cop replies with, "Oh, that's funny. You're just trying to get away from your wife. That's all it is." My grandpa replies, "No, I'm not married. I'm just trying to get home to Ohio, but yeah, whatever." And he turns to walk out because he feels the energy that he's not going to get any help by this police officer. So he turns to figure out how he's going to get to Ohio on his own and runs right into a very large police officer who just picks him up like he's a rag doll, sits him on a bench, and tells him, "Do not move." Grandpa says, "Okay, I'll sit right here. No worries." Imagine hearing this story and finding out this not by my grandfather, not by my father, but because I'm nosy and I go through the family history and I just happen to look through the newspapers and I see this plastered all over the place and my grandpa's sweet little high school photo on the front page of the newspaper. I'm like, how did we not know this? Why didn't you ever tell us this? And my grandpa just nonchalantly said, "Oh yeah, Y'all didn't know about that? That you didn't know that happened? My grandpa was able to make it home by hiding some cash in his sock, and the FBI also assisted on getting him home. He was put up in a roach motel kind of place for 2 days before they were able to get him back home. He ended up paying the FBI agent back that helped him get home, and he ended up being very thankful that he got to his mom's front yard at about 11 o'clock at night and was safe. And I'm sure she was very thrilled to have her baby back home. And I'm sure my dad and my aunt were happy to have their dad back home. A little bit about Brushy Mountain Branch Prison in Tennessee. It was also called Honor Farm, and it was referred to as Tennessee's Alcatraz. It was a maximum security prison nestled in the isolated mountainous terrains of Petros, Tennessee in Morgan County. It operated from 1896 to 2009, and it was steeped in dark history, yet a fascinating history tied to coal mining, convict labor, and infamous inmates. Brushy Mountain was notorious for its remote location surrounded by rugged mountains and dense forests. Yet these two were able to escape and kidnap not only the prison guard, but also my grandfather and go on at least a 2-month run. Its isolation made escaping nearly impossible and added to its mystique. The stone buildings were constructed using limestone quarried by the prisoners themselves. There were a few infamous inmates. One of them was James Earl Ray. He was the assassin of Dr. Martin Luther King, and he was incarcerated at Brushy Mountain from 1970 to 1992. The prison developed a reputation for being the toughest in the South. Overcrowding, violence, harsh conditions defined much of the operational life. The state eventually deemed it outdated and too costly to maintain, and it officially closed its doors to prisoners in 2009. Speaking of one of the infamous inmates, this is James Earl Ray. He was the assassin for Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and was incarcerated in Brushy Mountain, like I said, from 1970 until 1992. In 1977, he famously escaped the prison with 6 other inmates, but was captured 58 hours later. He was hiding out in the woods, but James and John, they escaped in 1971, and they were able to get out. The prison, like I said, was closed in 2009. However, it has been repurposed into a tourist attraction. You can go visit this place now. It has guided tours, museums, a distillery, concerts. They do paranormal investigations. You can walk through the cell blocks, see the prison chapel. You can see the history behind these stone walls. So what happened to the kidnappers? Well, one of them was found a month later. Without incident, he was arrested by the FBI at his father's home in Mississippi. This was on July 13th, 1971. That was Wayne Best. They were able to catch him pretty quickly, John Wayne Best. James Allen Bobo Bird had a far more unusual end to his time on the run. You guys are not going to believe this. While hiding out in Poughkeepsie, New York, which is about 2 hours north of New York City, so he managed to follow the freeway 2 hours north of New York City once my grandfather dropped him off. He underwent an emergency appendectomy. He had his appendix removed. My grandpa later discovered that when a medical debt collector started calling him wanting their money for the operation that my grandpa obviously didn't have. So Bobo used my grandpa's name to have a surgery after the kidnapping. But the surprises don't end there. James decided to enlist in the military using John Rose's identity. John, who is a Vietnam veteran who had already served in the Army. You might expect that the Army probably noticed that deception and caught on really quick, but no, they didn't. James was assigned to Fort Dix in New Jersey, and he had completed not only basic training, but also AIT. During his 30-day leave, because he was granted that after AIT, he was going to go on deployment into Germany. And my grandpa says, ain't that some mess that I'm sent to Vietnam War, yet this Bobo the Clown is being sent to Germany. Well, on that 30 days, he was in New York City, just kind of keeping him to himself, passing the time, and he was sitting in a bar all by himself in the back, nursing a beer on August 31st, 1971. A fight had broke out over a pool game, and somebody was shot. 2 nearby police officers that were walking on the street heard the gunfire and rushed into the bar. Nobody was allowed to leave. They questioned and interrogated and fingerprinted every single person in that bar, including Bobo. Bobo just happened to be fully dressed in his army uniform, getting arrested and taken to the New York prison where he was held on bond and faced possible life sentences. But you would think that would be the end of Bobo, but no. My grandfather got a surprise when Bobo's attorney called him, asking him to testify on James's behalf at the trial. John's response was obviously a very firm and unfiltered no. Moving on from the FBI and all the drama, here is the adorable photos of my Aunt Lori and my dad, Scott. That jacket that Scott is wearing was actually my grandpa's military uniform jacket. And my dad loved that jacket, and so he wore it for pictures. And I thought that was absolutely the most adorable thing ever, and I love this. Here is my beautiful Aunt Lori and my daddy. My daddy followed in his father's footsteps, and he also joined the Army. He was stationed in Fort Lewis, where he met my mother, and my little sister, my baby sister, was born. And then here is my grandpa with my Aunt Lori and my daddy in Bowling Green at one of our holidays. I think this might have been Thanksgiving in 2021. And then here is my Aunt Lori, my cousin Brittany in the middle. To the left is my grandpa, my Aunt Lori, and my cousin Brittany's son, Ben, when they went to Hocking Hills. My handsome cousin's son, Ben, dressed for a school dance. And then the little old pictures in the corner is my cousin Brittany as a baby, and then with my Aunt Lori. And then here is me and my dad and my little sister when we were little bitty, and then another picture in the corner of my dad, my sister, and I with my daughters Jasmine and Sapphire. And then the bottom picture, it was at my sister's wedding in 2022 with my bonus mom, Anne. And then I put together a little collage of photos of some of the family members. This isn't all inclusive. We're missing a few people, but John grew a very large family. He is a proud father, a proud grandfather, and even more proud great-grandfather. He built a strong family over the years. While some of us may not be as close as others, we all love each other deeply in our own ways. Our bond is rooted in laughter, definitely some sarcasm, and a whole lot of football. And because I'm a genetic genealogist, I have DNA tested most of the people in our family, and here is my dad's DNA. Remember when I said that the Rose family descends from a line of Welsh immigrants that had settled in Gallia County? Well, I decided to check my dad's DNA and see if that passed down and if that reflected. And of course, on the ethnicity report, it did. 68.4% British Irish, which was broken down into Wales. It matched. The story that had been passed down from generation to generation to generation to generation is true, which is kind of funny because usually our family stories are not that true. This one was true. You can see a little bit of that French DNA, the 29.1%. We're going to talk about that at a later date, like I had mentioned earlier. In 2022, here is the family picture from Norwalk, Ohio, which is in Huron County. This is when my sister got married in October of 2022. And again, here is a lot of the Rose family members, minus a couple, but we, for the most part, are there. You see my grandpa and my grandma next to the groom. You see the groom and my sister. You see my daddy, my daughters, Jasmine and Sapphire, my cousin Patience above them, my bonus mom above my dad, my cousin Brittany and I, which is our favorite picture here. We are above the bride and groom, and my Aunt Lori and her husband are next to my grandparents. So this is a super special photo, even though we don't have one. We still to this day do not have a photo of literally everybody. That's on my to-do list. We are coming towards the end of my presentation. I have released some brand new ebooks available on my website, AimeenRose-Haynes.com. The first one is a guide to navigating Ancestry Pro tools, which there are several of them, and this kind of helps you walk through how to use those, the pros and the cons and the best circumstances to use those pro tools. I also have an introductory beginning guide for genetic genealogy. That one was my debut ebook. That was the very first one that I put out. And the newest one is the Native American one. This is going to help you with the history and the enrollment process to one of the 5 civilized tribes. And I'm working on one about the 5 nations. So that one is coming soon. I want to thank you all for joining me on this journey of the Rose family history, which obviously is super special to me. The early days of Gallia County, where Seabird first laid down his roots, to the family's migration north into Wood County, Ohio. We've seen each generation that has worked hard. They have adapted, contributed to their communities that they had called home. The story of the Rose family, one is of perseverance, resilience, and a strong sense of connection to both their land and their loved ones. Through farming, leadership, and service, and an extraordinary adventure, the Rose family has a lasting legacy and continues throughout the generations today. It is a reminder that family history is not just about the names and the dates. It's about the lives that have been lived, the hardships that they have overcome, and the traditions that they have passed down through time. I want to thank you guys so much for allowing me to share this incredible story about the Rose family with you guys today.
Yes, we do have a couple questions for you. So the first one says, could the families move from Gallia County to Wood County, where they were sharecroppers, and then Wood County, where they farm their own land? They're asking, does that have a connection to Welsh tenant farmers' desire to leave Wales for emigration to North America?
I suspect, though, I haven't found the records, but following knowing what the history was with the Welsh immigrants and knowing what the history was in Gallia County, Ohio, I do suspect it, but I haven't found any concrete proof to say yes definitively.
Thank you. If somebody's looking to put together a presentation like this,
Mhm.
or maybe write it down, write their family story down, do you have any advice on how you went about crafting your presentation or organizing your information?
Yeah, so I just started as far back as I wanted to go. I could have went back further, but I decided to start at Seabird because he was the first one in that county that lived there. So I started with him first. I searched the records that were online. I called the library. I called the courthouse trying to get some records. So I even went to Salt Lake City, Utah when I was presenting there and stopped by their library, the research library, which is amazing, you guys. So many records, so much information. It's amazing. If you have to, you need to go. But I started with him and got all of those records together and had all of that in a spreadsheet of what I had on him, all the facts about him. And then I listed all of his children, and I wanted to follow the direct line from my dad up to the Seabird line. So, of course, I'm going to keep going that line. I'm going to do the same thing, keep repeating the process. Find all the records on the next person that I want to talk about, everything I can, put it into a spreadsheet type thing, or just list it so I knew what I had. And then from there, I'd start crafting. Okay, you're going to start with when they were born. Then you're going to say, okay, they had gotten married here. Here's this record. They had these children. They passed away here. Where are they buried? Or did they do anything in their life that I can prove? Are there any articles that I can grab? Like I had the ones with the checkers. If you can find all of those things and start compiling and organizing per person, then you can start putting together that story up until when you want to stop. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you. So, what are some of your favorite resources, specific resources that you used or you like to refer to for families that migrated through early Ohio?
One of my favorite ones is on Family Search. So when you go onto Family Search, it's free. You just have to register for the free account, is to look at their books. They have a lot of family history books and county history books that are digitized. So you could look at a book from 100 years ago that you may not be able to find in your local library. They may have it digitized where you can look at it. If there's a book that is not digitized, you can go to your Family Search location that's near you, usually the church, and use their resource room, and they can request that for you, or you can see it on their computers in their facility. So the books that you can't get a hold of, they probably have it, and it's going to be a good place that you can start your search that no, you're not going to be able to get anywhere else.
Thank you. Well, I think that finishes us up with questions, but I did want to mention if anybody would like a copy of the chat or if anybody has any other questions, please send us an email at genealogy@acpl.info and we can get that to you. So thank you again, Amy, for presenting. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate you guys.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.